Ali, son of Hussein and grandson of Ali bin Abu Talib, peace be upon them all, is the fourth divine Imam according to the Shia school of faith. He is widely known and referred to by his titles Zayn al-Abidin, the adornment of the worshippers, and Al-Sajjad, the one who prostrates. He was born on the 5th of Sha'ban in the year 38 after Hijrah. Imam Ali Zayn al-Abidin gifted the world with a legacy like none other. From the beginning of his life until his death, he manifested the highest levels of service to humankind and utmost submission to God. Despite the many trials he faced and tribulations he encountered, his outstanding contributions to mankind showed the world how one can remain unshaken and triumph above all odds.
Imam Ali, the son of Hussein, the son of Ali, the son of Abu Talib, peace and blessings be upon them all, is the fourth Imam of the Ahl al-Bayt and a man who is revered and respected by Muslims for centuries as a noble individual who has outstanding characteristics and excellence in many fields of life. He was born on Thursday, the 5th of the holy month of Sha'ban in the year 38 after Hijrah. And what is interesting is, of course, despite some historians perhaps mistakenly referring to his birthplace or city to be Medina, it is more likely that he was born in Kufa, because of course his father Imam al-Hussein and his grandfather Imam Ali alayhi salam were both in Kufa from the year 36 after Hijrah towards the year 40 after Hijrah at least, and therefore it is very likely that he was indeed born in Kufa itself. He spent first 2 years of his life in the company of his grandfather Imam Ali alayhi salam. 12 years of his life was with his uncle Imam al-Hasan, and 23 years was with his father, the master of the martyrs Imam al-Hussein, peace and blessings be upon him and his holy progeny.
History says that it was either his father Imam Hussein alayhi salam or Amir al-Mu'mineen himself who recited the adhan and iqamah in the ears of this child. As we know then, when he is born, he is named himself by his grandfather Ali bin Abi Talib. As we know, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam is the oldest son, according to most historical reports, of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. One thing we notice about the A'imma is that their wives were from different tribes, different nations, and this was part of the hikmah and wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He wanted the A'imma alayhim salam to be representative of different communities. And so when you look, you find some were Coptic, some were from North Africa, some were from the Arabian Peninsula itself. As for Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, he has a statement where he says that I am from the best of the Arabs and the non-Arabs. Of course, the best of the Arabs, Jibreel in a narration says, I looked east and west, all across the world, and I didn't find a tribe better than Quraysh. And within Quraysh, of course, were the Banu Hashim, which I saw to be the best. So the best of the Arabs, the best of the people in that area. As for his other side, his mother, we are told that his grandfather, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, during those few years that he was the Khalif, we are told that there was a certain number of captives that were brought to the Islamic world. When they were bought, now there's a difference of opinion. Were they bought during the time of the second Khalif, Umar al-Khattab, in which case they would have been brought straight to Medina? Others say no, they were bought as captives during the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, or even the third Khalif. So some say during the time of the second Khalif or the third. When they brought to Medina, these captives, we are told amongst them was a woman who was known in the Farsi language as Shahrbanu, or in Arabic Shahrbanawiyyah. And when they get married, they are given glad tidings. Imam Hussein is told by his father that through this woman you will be given a child who will carry the torch of imamah and divine leadership.
He also changed her name from Shah-e-Zanan to Sheher Banu. Although she did have other names as well. And that's because, of course, likely that Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen wanted to highlight that there is only one lady who's the chief women of the world, and that is Sayyida Fatima, peace and blessings be upon her, his beloved wife and the Prophet's daughter. Unfortunately, Sheher Banu passed away when she gave birth to Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, and therefore he did not necessarily enjoy the presence of his mother during his lifetime, and was indeed born an orphan. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen praised her and said, وَهِيَ أُمُّ الْأَوْصِيَاء وَالذُّرِّيَّةُ الطَّاهِرَةِ. She is the mother of the vicegerents and the pure progeny, and therefore she was very much respected as an individual by the Imams alayhim salam.
According to the narrations and historical reports, his mother passes away just after giving birth. And so during his early life, he spends his time with a woman who was part of the family or who was employed to take care of him.
Imam Ali Zayn al-Abidin was admired and revered by not only the close companions of the household of the Prophet, peace be upon him, rather his knowledge, wisdom, and lofty position was well known even by those who opposed him.
The famous companion of the Prophet, Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, may Allah be pleased with him, says that مَا رُؤِيَ فِي أَوْلَادِ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ, the sons of the prophets, we have not seen anyone مثل Ali ibn al-Husayn, like Ali ibn al-Husayn, and people like Yazid ibn Muawiyah, who of course was the man mainly responsible for the massacre of Karbala, testifies to the wonderful characteristics of Imam Sajjad. He says, إِنَّهُ مِنْ أَهْلِ بَيْتٍ زُقُّ الْعِلْمَ زَقًّا, that he, Ali, is from a family of the Prophet who are drenched and deeply empowered, so to speak, with knowledge.
As for the early life and the first few years of the Holy Imam alayhi salam, history tells us very little of his time with his grandfather, because there was only 2 years that took place. However, those 2 years were very difficult for Amir al-Mu'mineen due to the political conflicts and the other things that had taken place in the Ummah. And so we don't know a lot about how he was with his grandfather, other than about his birth. As we are aware, after the death of and martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, the family of Ahlul Bayt, they moved back to Medina. And so the first few years of the Holy Imam alayhi salam are spent under his father's guidance in the holy city of Medina. We are told during that time, as all of the Imam alayhi salam would do so, they would follow the Holy Imam, the father, Imam Hussein, or whichever Imam it was. They would take the divine guidance and knowledge. And we have certain anecdotes and incidents that took place. For example, on one occasion, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam is unwell. When he's unwell, his holy father comes and says, "What do you desire? What is your complaint? What is your request from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?" At this moment in time, you'll notice that the Imam, the Sajjad alayhi salam, says that I do not want to be of those who complains and is always desiring something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is one of the qualities of the awliya of God, of the saints of God. Even in trials and tribulations, they never complain. They would say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. They would say other things. They would never complain, Ya Allah, why did this happen? Imam Hussein says, what do you want? You are unwell. What do you say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He doesn't say, Ya Allah, why did you make me unwell? Ya Allah, give me shifa and healing quickly. He says, I'm happy with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala desires, and I don't want to be of those people who is constantly complaining to Allah. In which case, Imam Hussein alayhi salam tells As-Sajjad, who is of young age, that you are exactly like Ibrahim al-Khalil. Because Ibrahim alayhi salam had this quality of never complaining to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you have followed in this quality and in the footsteps of Ibrahim alayhi salam.
Why did Imam Ali ibn al-Husayn was referred to as Zayn al-Abidin, as the adornment or the beacon of the worshippers? No one had ever been given that title, and it was kind of exclusive to him. And it was, of course, given to him by the Prophet of Islam, peace and blessings be upon him and his holy progeny, in that tradition. But it actually demonstrated and manifested the deep connection that this blessed individual had with his creator, God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which was demonstrated through his connection and reverence in prayer, as well as his supplication. The legacy of Imam Zain al-Abidin is demonstrated when it comes to studying his life and how in every opportunity he would remember God, would go down into prostration, hence being known as Sajjad. And worship for him was not something that is done due to necessity. Worship in the eyes of Zain al-Abidin was an act performed due to love of God. It is something he actually enjoyed. It's something that he actually looked forward to, and it would bring happiness in his life. And he would be beaming with this spiritual light and reflecting it upon people around him.
The Battle of Karbala, which took place in the year 61 after Hijrah, was a major turning point in the history of Islam. Yazid, the son of Muawiyah, who was illegitimately appointed by his father as the Caliph of the Muslims, launched a brutal war against Hussein, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Imam Hussein was presented with the ultimatum of submitting to Yazid and endorsing him as the rightful leader and guide for the Muslims, or facing death. Imam Hussein, who was on his journey towards the city of Kufa in Iraq, whose residents had called him to their aid, was intercepted by the soldiers of Yazid in a place called Karbala, where he was coerced into battle. Imam Hussein and his 72 companions were martyred by Yazid's army of 30,000, and thereafter Imam Ali Zain al-Abidin carried the torch of divine leadership, succeeding his father, Imam Hussein.
واقعة كربلاء في الحقيقة هي خلفت جرح أعتقد مؤلم جدا في الحقيقة في نظر الأئمة، مو فقط لبشاعة ما جرى للإمام الحسين ولأهل بيته، إنما اللي جرى للدين. هذا في الحقيقة كان تقويض للدين، فهاي كانت مؤلم أكثر من كونه الأئمة عليهم السلام هم في الحقيقة باعوا أنفسهم لله عز وجل، والله قبل البيع، لذلك هم شهداء على هذه الأمة بما قدموا من تضحيات.
The transferal of Imamah to As-Sajjad alayhi salam was one of the most difficult that we have seen throughout the lives of any of the Imam. Because as we know, that Imamah and divine leadership transfers to the next Imam when the previous Imam passes away. However, the transferal during this time was the most difficult. Why? Number one, a few days before the battle of Karbala and Ashura, he falls unwell. This wasn't something that he was always unwell throughout his life, from the time he was in Medina and even afterwards. No, in order for there to be a reason that he doesn't go and fight, otherwise it's wajib and compulsory for him to fight. In order for there to be a reason for him to not be able to fight, and so that Imamah is protected after his father, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him this illness. This illness is for a few days, and we are told it's like a very bad flu or an infection that someone would have today, in such a way that they cannot get out from their bed. So he's bedridden for a few days. Despite this, the riwayat and the books of Maqatil of Karbala say he would get up whenever he had energy, and he would take his sword, he would put on the aba that would be worn for fighting, and he would tell his father, I'm ready to go and protect you and your religion. But Imam Hussein alayhi salam would say, you are unwell, this isn't for you to fight. To protect in the battlefield is not something which is obligatory to those who are unwell, and so he would go back.
What happened after Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was mercilessly butchered and slayed on the plains of Karbala was something that Imam Zain al-Abidin would remember for the rest of his life. It is said that he said famously, when remembering what happens, it is said that he said that when he remembered what happened on the 10th of Muharram, he would say, Wallah ma nadartu ila ammati wa akhawati illa wa khanaqatni al-abra. I have never looked at my aunties and my sisters except that I have felt a great sense of grief and sorrow. وَتَذَكَّرْتُ فِرَارُهُنَّ يَوْمَ الطَّفِّ مِنْ خَيْمَةٍ إِلَى خَيْمَةٍ. I remembered them running away from one tent to another on the day of Ashura, when the people used to say, أحرقوا بيوت الظالمين, that the army of Yazid used to say, burn down the tents of the oppressors. Now, of course, Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, despite being ill and not able to necessarily protect his family members, had a tremendous role after Karbala. First, it is mentioned in traditions that he was the one who came back on the 13th of the month of Muharram, 3 days after the massacre, to bury the bodies of the shuhada, but importantly the body of his father Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, as well as that of his uncle Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. When he buried the body, he placed a stone on the grave and said, هذا قبر الحسين بن علي الذي قتل عطشانا غريبا. This is the grave of Hussein ibn Ali, who is killed whilst thirsty and whilst alone, or some narration says it was placed on it mazluma also. The Imam was killed unjustly. He also made sure that there was the awareness that needed to be raised within the circles in Kufa as well as in Damascus about the plight of the Ahlul Bayt, but exactly what happened on the 10th of Muharram. So himself and Sayyidah Zainab played a pivotal role for the aftermath of the tragedy.
Once the 10th of Muharram passes, Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, as we know, the holy household, are made prisoners. Once they are made prisoners, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam now has a vital role to ensure the safety of all of the women and children that were with him. Alongside him, of course, in this journey were the heads of the shuhada and the martyrs as they were traveling. We are told on many occasions, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam says, I saw many things, many atrocities that I have never been able to forget. For example, when he was asked after he returned back into Medina of what were the most difficult things he saw in this journey, As-Sajjad alayhi salam says the first was that when we got to Kufa, we were made to stand outside of the gate of Kufa for 1 day. With no water, with nothing, the sun is there, the children are there, the women. When I asked, why are you making us stand here? Why are you making us wait? The reply came from Umar bin Sa'd, because we wish to decorate all of Kufa that today Ahlul Bayt are entering as prisoners. He says, this was the first thing that I can never forget. He says, the second thing, when we entered, they placed us next to that area where slaves and servants would be bought and sold. And so when we were standing in those areas, people would come up to us and up to my women and children and say, we wish to buy this person as a slave or a servant. We wish to buy this individual. And we would reply, we are not slaves, we are not servants. We are the sons of Zahra and Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhim as-salam. He says this was the second atrocity. As-Sajjad says what the third thing is, when we were made to go through the market of Kufa, we would be pelted with whatever they had in their hands. He said sometimes they would boil water and throw it on our faces. He says on one occasion a person took a piece of coal, he threw it on my turban set on fire, and I was shouting to those around me that help the grandson of the Prophet of Islam, remove this. Because my hands were in chains, I was unable to remove it until that coal burnt all of my turban and it reached onto my head. And then he shows this companion, the marks of the burns are still on the head of As-Sajjad alayhi salam. This was a time where he tries to make sure that the children are safe. As we know, during this journey, often the children would fall off from the camels and horses and would die. He would have to perform their burials. And this was a time he made sure that the women, their safety was ensured until they get to Sham, and of course until they get to Medina.
In the aftermath of Karbala, Imam Ali Zayn al-Abidin played a pivotal role in making it known to the people of Kufa and Damascus what had just occurred in the Muslim world. The grandson of the Prophet of Islam had just been killed in cold blood. The very Prophet who brought the religion that these people claimed to be adherents of, and his household, were being paraded through the streets as captives. Imam Zayn al-Abidin delivered a series of powerful sermons that sought to awaken the conscience of the people. These sermons are said to have contributed to an uprising which undermined Yazid's hold of power across the Muslim world.
In Kufa, he gives a sermon, in which he highlights who he is. أيها الناس من عرفني فقد عرفني. If, O people, whoever knows me, and whoever doesn't know me, I will introduce myself to them. And then he says, أنا من انتهكت حرمته وسلبت نعمته. I am the one who his sacredness and sanctity has been violated, and the blessings taken away from him. أنا ابن من قتل صبرا وكفى بذلك فخرا. I am the son of the one who is slaughtered in cold blood, but it's a matter of pride for me. It's a matter of honor that my father was slaughtered in this particular way. And generally and gradually, the people of Kufa's perception and understanding of what happened on the 10th began to change positively towards the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, due to these sermons, due to the interactions with the people.
As for the second sermon, where reports from Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman, Ajillahu ta'ala Faraj al-Sharif, come stressing on people to read this sermon of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Here we are told when he enters into the palace of Yazid, Yazid decides to tell one of the orators, one of the khutaba from his palace, from his government, to go onto the pulpit and the minbar and to speak about the virtues of his father Muawiyah and Yazid and their family. As this person is speaking, the people were gathered, because the people were told captives have come. As this person was speaking, the people were gathered. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam suddenly is filled with this might from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this jalal. And he says that, do you give me permission حَتَّى أَسْعَدَ هَذِهِ الْأَعْوَادِ? Do you give me permission so that I can go and stand or sit on these pieces of wood? The language of As-Sajjad alayhi salam is very important. Why? He didn't say حَتَّى أَسْعَدَ هَذَا الْمِنْبَرِ, so that I can go onto this minbar and pulpit. He says, so that I can go onto these pieces of wood. Why? In Ghadir, there wasn't a pulpit. There were saddles from the horses, but that was called a minbar, a pulpit. And here they may have had the best of carvings and the best of wood and the best of pulpits, but he didn't call it a minbar. Why? Because he was saying from that place where Ahlul Bayt's wilayah is protected and they are supported, that is called a minbar. But when the enemies of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam are spoken about and preferred and supported, that is just like pieces of wood. He says, do you give me permission? He says, no. The people around Imam Sajjad, they said, we saw this man filled with beauty and might, and we wanted to hear what he was going to say. So we told Yazid ibn Muawiyah, allow him to speak. Yazid says, إِنَّهُ مِنْ أَحْلِ الْبَيْتِ قَدْ زُقُّ الْإِلْمِ زَقًّا. He is from Ahlul Bayt. They were spoon-fed. Every single moment of their life, they were given knowledge. He says, I can't let him go onto the minbar because I know he will speak against my family. Eventually, the Imam is allowed to go and embark onto these pieces of wood, in which case the historical reports mentions ثم خطب خطبة أبكى منها العيون وأوجل منها القلوب. Then he gives a khutbah which causes the eyes of the people to be filled with tears and the hearts to be filled with awe and fear of this individual.
الحمد لله الأول الذي لا بداية له والدائم الذي لا نفاذ له قدر الليالي والأيام وقسم فيما بينهما الأقسام فتبارك الله الملك العلام. أيها الناس أحذركم من الدنيا وما فيها فإنها دار زوال وانتقال تنتقل بأهلها من حال إلى حال. قد أفنت القرون الماضية والأمم الخالية الذين كانوا أطول منكم أعمارا وأبعد منكم آثارا وأشد بأسا وقوة وجنانا. أفنتهم أيدي الزمان واحتوت عليهم الأفاعي والديدان. أفنتهم الدنيا فكأنهم ما كانوا لها أهلا ولا سكانا. أكل التراب لحومهم وبدد أوصالهم وغير محاسنهم وبدل محاسنهم. أيها الناس.
You notice that when he gives this khutbah, Sometimes people ask, why do scholars and speakers and khataba and orators in Muharram, Ramadan, why do they speak of the virtues of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam? The answer is our Aimma, when they would get a chance to give knowledge to the people, they would speak about the virtues of Ahlul Bayt. Sometimes people say, no, you should speak about lessons that we can learn from akhlaq. All of these are important. However, people have not understood, there is no virtue of Ahlul Bayt except that next to it there is a moral issue or an akhlaqi point or something that I can implement into my life. Therefore, when they speak about virtues of Amir al-Mu'mineen and their Imma, because next to it there's something to do with ilm or generosity or knowledge. When he gets a chance to give this sermon, what does he say? He says, we were given 6 things and we were preferred in 7 ways. And then he goes to mention we were given knowledge and generosity and forbearance, and we were preferred from all other communities and all other groups because from us was the Prophet of Islam. Then he says from us was As-Siddiq, being the title of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. He says from us was At-Tayyar, from us were all of these As-Sabtayn, Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. Then he says, and from us is Mahdiyu hadhihi al-Ummah. The Mahdi is from our family. Then he goes to speak about himself. Here there are very beautiful lines. He says, for example, I am the son of Mecca and Mina. I am the son of Safa and Marwa. I am the son of Zamzam. Why does he say these things? Some said when he said, I am the son of Mecca and Mina, I am the son of Zamzam, Safa and Marwa, because these things were those areas or places accepted by all Muslimin. So he was saying that in the way that you accept all of these, I am the son, meaning I am part of these things which you already accept. You accept Mecca and Mina to be noble and honorable. I am part of these things. Others said when he said I am the son of Mecca and Mina and Zamzam and Safa, he meant to say that all of these are sha'air of Allah. Quran says, إِنَّ السَّفَا وَالْمَرْوَةَ مِنْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَمَنْ حَجَّ الْبَيْتَ أَوْ ائْتَمَرَ فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِ أَنْ يَطَّوَّفَ بِهِمَا. The Safa and Marwa, the 2 mountains, are the signs of God. He was saying in the way that all of these are signs of God and take you closer to Allah, I am the son of these things. In other words, what? I do the same thing. I am one of the greatest signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the way that it is wajib for you to do the tawaf and go to Makkah al-Mukarramah at least once, and it's wajib for you to do the sa'i, it's wajib for you to respect me as one of these signs of God.
When Yazid wanted to end this sermon, which is a sermon that must be studied and looked at with so much detail, by announcing or requiring somebody to recite the adhan, the call to prayer, Imam even used that to highlight the injustice that happened. When the reciter said, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, Imam Zayn al-Abidin looked at Yazid and said, this Muhammad, is he my grandfather or yours? If you say he is yours, then you're a liar. If you admit he is my grandfather, then why did you slaughter his own grandchildren? And so these words were indeed very, very powerful.
Also, we understand there are certain hidden messages found within. When you say, I am the son of a certain thing, this means you are saying whatever qualities were found in that thing are found within me. In Arabic, this is used. When I'm the son of X, Y, Z, whatever is found in there is found in me. So when he says, for example, I'm the son of Zamzam, why? Because you'll notice that Zamzam as a stream or as a well, this water source, was something that saved the life of a prophet of God. Ismail is about to die of thirst. Zamzam is that which quenches the thirst of Ismail and saves the life of the prophet of God, allowing the religion of that prophet of God to be saved. As Sajjad says, I'm the son of Zamzam. Zamzam saves the life of a religion of the prophet of God. I, with my existence, saved the life of Islam and the deen of my grandfather Rasulullah.
It is the opinion of the historians that Yazid would not allow them to stay for long in this particular city due to the positive influence that they were having upon the people. And it is unlikely that they remained there for a year. When he moved back to Medina, he continued sermon after sermon, telling people about what happened, informing them about the tragedy itself. He was one of those who remained in the state of grief. And it must be understood that this grief was not only emotional, but these tears were tears of rejection of falsehood. these tears, as much as they were, of course, in the state of pain and suffering, they were also tears to empower people and to awaken their conscience and to make them understand the gravity of the situation. And someone would say to him, "Oh, the grandson of the Prophet, why are you still crying so many years after Karbala?" He would say, "Yaqub, the Prophet, when he lost his son, knowing that he's still alive, he became blind due to the crying. I saw my own family members, my father, my uncles, the companions of the Prophet, and Imam Ali slaughtered on the plains of Karbala. Who wouldn't cry when they see such tragedies occurring before them?"
هناك ظروف كثيرة تحيط، يعني النبي الأكرم صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم مر بظروف، هذه الظروف نفسها هي اللي يمر بها الأئمة بمختلف فترات حياتهم. قد يكون الإمام في فترة إمامته يمر بأكثر من ظرف معين يناسب مثلا ظرف النبي الأكرم في مكة عندما كان في بداية دعوته، وكذلك في بعض الأئمة له دور النبي في المدينة، بعضهم كما الإمامين الباقرين الصادقين سلام الله عليهما، هذول كان أيضا فترة زمنية محددة جعلت العلم ينتشر في زمنهم بشكل كبير، وهذا أمر واضح. لذلك حياة الإمام زين العابدين سلام الله عليه الإمام السجاد في الحقيقة جاءت بعد فترة عصيبة وصلت فيها الأمة إلى مستوى انحدار متناهي. فأنا في تصوري الفترة التي عاش فيها الإمام بعد استشهاد الإمام الحسين سلام الله عليه هي تماما كالفترة التي عاش فيها النبي الأكرم صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم في مكة. والمتتبع لمسيرة أو سيرة النبي أن في مكة يجد تأسيس عقائدي للرسالة الإسلامية، فكانت الأحكام أغلبها في المدينة، بينما في مكة كان هو التأسيس. أعتقد أن بقتل الأمة للإمام الحسين بهذه الطريقة البشعة كانما الأمة رجعت إلى نقطة الصفر، فحياة الإمام زين العابدين سلام الله عليه تلونت، أو الظاهر كان الواضح فيها إعادة الأمة إلى النقطة الأولى. لذلك واحدة من الأشياء اللطيفة اللي أيضا ننتبه إليها أسماء الأئمة وألقابهم في الحقيقة تعكس دورهم، يعني الإمام الصادق، الإمام الباقر، بهذه الأسماء الإمام زين العابدين غلب عليه مسألة العبادة والخشوع، وهذا في الحقيقة هو أصل الدين. لذلك أعتقد فترة الإمام هي فترة إعادة الأمة إلى النقطة الأولى، وهي معرفة الله عز وجل، فكانت صبغته العبادة. كان أبرز ما وصلنا من آثار أدعيته والصحيفة السجادية ورسالة الحقوق، هذه أبرز ما كان في فترة الإمام سلام الله عليه، وكلها في الحقيقة تؤسس لمفهوم الدين من جديد في ضمير الأمة، لأن ما وصلت إليه الأمة في الحقيقة ما يحتاج، يعني مسألة ترقيعية ما تنفع، مسألة ثورات سياسية أو تغيير سياسي سطحي ما كان يفيد. لذلك تجد الإمام سلام الله عليه ناحية التربية الخاصة.
Following the massacre at Karbala, Yazid was challenged by the elite fractions of Medina who disapproved of his succession as the Caliph of the Muslims, resented his impious lifestyle and unjust policies, and declared a rebellion against him. The incident was known as the Battle of Harra and is recorded in historical sources as one of the major crimes committed by the Umayyads.
In the year 63 after Hijrah, there was the famous incident known as Ma'rakatul Harra, or the Battle of Harra, in which Yazid ibn Muawiyah commanded his army to violate the sanctity of the city of the Prophet, and thousands of people were killed, innocent women were raped, and so on and so forth. There was a man by the name of Marwan ibn al-Hakam, who was the enemy of the Prophet and the Ahl al-Bayt. And he had his family members, and he didn't know what to do with his family members, and he wanted to run away from Medina, knowing that the army of Yazid is coming from Damascus, and there will be bloodshed. There's going to be people killed in Medina. And he was confused. So he said, where shall I leave my family? Who's going to look after them? They suggested to him, according to Imam Al-Tabari in his Tarikh, they suggested that he should go and leave them in the house of Abdullah ibn Umar ibn al-Khattab. When he knocked on the door, Abdullah said, no, I have nothing to do with your family. And he shut the door on his face. He said, where else should I go? They said, go to the house of generosity, house of Zayn al-Abidin. Remembering that Marwan ibn al-Hakam was a staunch enemy of the Ahl al-Bayt. Remembering that Marwan ibn al-Hakam had said to Walid ibn Uqba in Medina to kill Imam al-Hussein in the presence of Imam al-Hussein when he would not give bay'ah to Yazid. but he knocked on that door. And that door of kindness did not disappoint, because Imam Zain al-Abidin said, bring your family. And after the tragedy had happened and people were killed and Yazid's army left, Marwan returned back to Medina. He went back to the house of Imam Sajjad and sought his family. And when he took his family from that house, he asked them, how did he treat you? How did the grandson of the Prophet treat you? And they responded that we have never been honored and respected and treated so well like we were by Zain al-Abidin. And so Imam alayhi salam highlighted and demonstrated in so many of these instances sublime moral characteristics for others to learn from. The other challenge that was facing the Muslim community at that time was the infusion of ideologies, concepts and beliefs from outside the Muslim world to within the different communities in different cities. So you have people coming and preaching all kinds of ideas which have no basis in Islam. And somehow some began to adopt them and accept them as Islamic teachings. For example, Imam Zain al-Abidin one day came to Masjid al-Nabawi and he heard someone speaking to people and trying to make them accept that God the Almighty has human-like features, what is known today as tashbih or tatsim, anthropomorphism. So Imam alayhi salam then immediately raised his hands in dua, and he has a supplication which is found also in Sahif al-Sajjadiyya, which completely and categorically and vehemently exonerates God the Almighty from any any human-like features or attributes, and describes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way he should be described. So it's about, standing up to misconceptions and falsehood that were generally being spread. And remember, the objective of Bani Umayyah was exactly this. Muawiyah himself would say when he hears the adhan, I'm going to bury this declaration under the ground. It was intended to take Islam to another degree of distortion, whereby people would not follow the teachings of the Prophet, but rather their own made up set of instructions which had no basis whatsoever.
Imam Ali Zain al-Abidin utilized the art of supplication to spread the true teachings of the religion among society during the era of his divine leadership. He produced some renowned works that sought to teach humankind how to converse intimately with God and build a deep spiritual connection with Him. The most famous collection of his supplications is known as Al-Sahif al-Sajjadiyya, translated in English as the Book of Al-Sajjad.
People were in dire need of spiritual upliftment. And every imam comes, assesses the situation of the community and the society. And just like how a physician looks at an individual who is suffering with an illness and may not always prescribe the same medication because they believe that this individual had their unique symptoms. Not every medicine would work for every individual. And therefore they would believe that this particular person, because of perhaps the other medication that they're taking, needs this remedy. Imam alayhi salam studied the society at that time, plagued with intoxication of this world, recognized that one of the things that's needed is spirituality and upliftment as far as speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and bringing back people towards the Surah. Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam mastered the art of communication with God, and that's why, for example, we have this wonderful supplication known as Dua Abu Hamza al-Thamali, which is often only recited in the month of Ramadan, but it is so valuable, such rich, deep, profound words of inspiration. Anybody who recites Dua Abu Hamza and actually reflects on the words of Dua Abu Hamza realizes how Imam Zain al-Abidin takes the individual on a journey of discovery, on a journey of enlightenment, on a journey of finding our purpose in life, on a journey of positivity, but also on awareness of the reality of death, and to reflect upon how we are going to spend our time in this world. What is our position when it comes to our connection and relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Abu Hamza al-Thamali was a close companion of Imam Zain al-Abidin. According to historical sources, Abu Hamza was amongst the most reliable narrators of tradition and was described by the 8th Shia Imam, Imam Ali al-Rida, as the Salman al-Muhammadi of his time. Imam Zayn al-Abidin taught him a lengthy supplication that he would recite during the early hours of the morning in the holy month of Ramadan. This supplication was named after him and is known today as Dua Abu Hamza al-Thumali.
The Imam in the Dua of Abu Hamza, if a person reads through it, first he goes to discuss the ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After which he speaks about the paths to success and happiness in this world and the akhirah. He then goes to do dua himself and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for certain needs. After which he ends by speaking about accepting one's faults and shortcomings. In this dua, if a person, the dua is very extensive, but every single section of this dua has keys of ma'arif and keys of ma'rifah and cognizance. For example, he mentions in one part of the dua that whenever I stand up to pray towards you, I become tired. Nu'as, he says, comes onto me whenever I try to stand and pray to you, Ya Allah. Of course, he's not talking about himself, he's talking about us. He says some people, as soon as they do Allahu Akbar, as soon as it comes to open the Quran, they begin to yawn. Why? He mentions there 5 or 6 or maybe more reasons as to why a person, when he wishes to do ibadah, is unable to do ibadah and worship. He says, for example, because I am mustakhifan bihaqqik, I don't adhere to your right, Ya Allah. Number 2, I am in majalis al-battaleen, majalis of people that are doers of wrong, the majalis where gatherings which have no benefit of ghiba and gossip and these issues. He says, and ba'adtani, and I was away from the majalis and the gatherings of ulama and scholars. He goes and highlights all of these reasons. In other words, making this a lesson for me and you as to how I can improve my ibadat and worship. That these are the things that I've done in my life which made me not have a connection with my Lord. In each section, he, for example, speaks about how low of a servant he is in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Each section has some sort of ma'rifah or some sort of way in which a person can improve their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
When we see his devotion to God, we recognize that it was not necessarily only reflected in his words and his supplications. Of course, in the world of du'as now, such as the important collection of Sahih al-Sajjadiyya, as well as other supplications, you find that the Imam did not focus only on one thing. Yes, there are supplications on repentance, there are supplications on being thankful, on being humble to gain strength. There are invocations and du'as when it comes to parents. There are du'as when it comes to one's own children or difficulty or calamities and so on and so forth. But they were also very much part and parcel of his life when he interacted with people. So unfortunately, what exists today is this misconception that enemies of the Imam have placed with regards to his personality and his life. They depict him as somebody who is a recluse, so to speak, who somehow barricaded himself to the mosque or to his house, crying only, worshipping a God only, not being part of society, not engaging, not being active out there. Whereas this is far from the truth. Imam alayhi salam had a reform program for society. He had specific instructions and clear agenda and a plan to awaken the conscience of the people.
As we know, the Imam during the early hours of the morning would read, for example, 1,000 units of prayer, would read these supplications to such an extent that he was known as Dhu Thafanat. And thafana in Arabic refers to those extra pieces of skin. You know, the example that the riwayat mentioned and history mentioned is when a camel sits on the ground for too long, its knees and the places that touch the ground have an excess of skin. Thafana, why was he called Dhu Thafanat? Because of his sujood and prostration was so extensive that he had these excess pieces of skin that would grow on his forehead every few months. He would remove them, naturally, because of course they are a hindrance. He would remove them and he would tell his son, Imam Al-Baqir alayhi salam, that when I pass away, bury these pieces of my skin with me so that I can show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what ibadah and worship I've done.
Historians and scholars, those who have analyzed history, have said, well, there were two major problems. The first was the increase in the love of materialism and the distancing away from God, from Islamic values, from commitment to instigate change and positive transformation. So people were very much drawn towards wealth and the pleasures of this world, and became less and less devoted to God as time went on, which was a program or a agenda very much orchestrated by the Umayyads. And that's why they were able to influence tribes and leaders and others. There was a slow, gradual inclination towards falsehood. There was a decline of morality and adherence to values that were taught by the Prophet of Islam and his holy family and the righteous of his companions. And that is where, for example, you find Imam alayhi salam really stood up and made a difference.
Imam Zayn al-Abidin lived at a time that was witnessing great spiritual decline, where immorality was widespread throughout society. But through his book of supplications, as well as the reputed treatise on rights known as Risalat al-Huquq, he rekindled the torch of spirituality and devotion to God in the hearts of many, even hundreds of generations later.